How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, forgive me, I'm a little hoarse. I've been excited. You know, the YouTube channel is doing very well, meeting a lot of great people. And in my excitement, you know, being all excited because my followers are going up, I started losing my voice, which is really not good in my position. Good for people actually that don't want me speaking, though. I'll tell you that. But, you know, not good for me. Guys, we're going to have a great dialogue, guys. I'm going to have Connie Eileen, she's going to co-host with me, and we're going to have Dr. Laura Bedard on. Now, Dr. Laura Bedard, she's going to introduce you to her story, but right now she is a jail warden. She is very familiar with inmate manipulation, so part of what we're going to discuss is going to go into manipulation, may touch a little into Vicki White's case, and we're also going to focus on things that we could do better. So if you're correctional staff, I do advise that you listen to this whole dialogue, because again, I know a lot of people think that it can't happen to them, but they're so outcome driven that they don't realize it's not the outcome, it's the process. So a lot of us are quick to say, I'll never bring in a phone, I'll never bring in drugs, I'll never have sex with an inmate, but there's a process there. And what I would like people to be made aware of is of the process, knowing that it can happen. So this conversation is both for our new boots and our senior staff who may be a little bit resistant, thinking that it may not apply to them, but trust and believe, guys, the knowledge here does apply. So first, what I'm going to do is I got to introduce my sponsors. I have three. First, I have American Military University. If you guys get a chance, if you're looking to get a degree, seek higher education, please check out American Military University. It's a great online school, very supportive of what we do in corrections, very supportive of the Tier Talk channel. So again, if you guys get a chance, please check it out. We also have Guardian RFID. Guardian RFID, let me just get where is my, hold on, guys. I got to get the sponsors notes. Where is it? I did a lot of screenshots. Let's do Share first. We have Share USA. Share USA is the world's leading weapon, cell phones, and contraband detection system manufacturer for corrections. They do our metal detectors, most of the metal detectors that you see at the airports. For more information, contact Joe Vasquez at 440-561-7615. He's a subject matter expert. He's passionate about our industry, and he will take good care of you. And then we also have Guardian RFID. Let me just having trouble finding it. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, guys, if you get a chance, check out GuardianRFID.com. They also have a YouTube channel. Found it. That's what you do when you don't give up. Pure effort there. Today's video is brought to you by Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit GuardianRFID.com for more information. Okay, guys, so again, we have a great dialogue. Let me bring in Connie first. What's up, Connie? You're muted.
I know that. That's why I didn't talk. I didn't even talk that time because I knew.
Watch that on the replay because I think I motivated you on that.
Nope.
Connie, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Connie Eileen here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage with Sir Cocoon. I'm also a criminal justice professor, which I don't talk about much, at Monroe College. And today I'm just really excited to really just get to learn and know more about Dr. Laura, but also just I think it's a great discussion. Because we talk a lot about, Vicki White, Casey, and all that stuff, right? But I think there's a lot more behind that we could explore and learn more about. So I look forward to the dialogue.
Yeah, and guys, by the way, as we start moving away from Vicki White, I do have one more show scheduled Friday. I got a prison inspector on. He's going to talk about how you investigate a prison escape. And then next Wednesday, I have a very good show. I have a young woman. Her name is Michelle Threat, Threatt. She got assaulted during an inmate escape. The inmate escaped out of, he was a Polk County inmate, and he escaped. Hold on, my kid's calling me. What is it? Okay, well, shut the door. I'm on a show. So, yes, I got my youngest. So, she just, Michelle Threat, I think it's Threat. I hope I'm saying her name right. She was assaulted by an inmate on a hospital trip in his effort to escape. He did make it out 300 yards, butt naked, by the way, but he was caught. At that point, she was beaten so bad, she never went back to being a deputy. She actually winds up doing stuff for children, like a food drive. I found her story so interesting that I wanted to have her on to discuss the story, and I think the audience would definitely find some interest in that. Now, guys, I also have our guest coming on, Dr. Laura Bedard. Let me just get her in. Hey, Doc, what's going on?
Good evening. Hi, Anthony. Thank you for having me tonight.
Pleasure is mine. Doc, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Sure. I am Laura Bedard. I'm currently the Chief of Corrections for the Seminole County Sheriff's Office in Sanford, Florida, Central Florida. Seminole County Jail is my 8th facility, so I've been at both jails and prisons. And unfortunately, I've seen our topic that we're going to discuss tonight way too many times. I recently finished a book called What Do I Wear to the Execution, which is a fictional story of a woman's journey through the corrections system as a warden. So I encourage your viewers to go look for that book.
Yes, I heard it's an amazing read. I'm waiting to get my copy. Correct, Doc?
It should be there. I mailed it earlier.
All right, I'm going to read it, and then we'll have, obviously on again to discuss the book. What I got to ask you before we go into the topic, what made you think of that like the title for the book? What's the book about?
Well, before I worked for the Department of Corrections, I too, Connie, was a university professor, and I got my name on the list to view an execution. And like many women, what do we think first? I thought, what do you wear to an execution? What's the appropriate attire? So I wrote that down as a title. So I had the title for the book way before I had the actual content to the book. And then I just started writing stories down from things that I saw that I thought free world people would never believe this happened. So I started writing down these stories and ended up last year completing the book. So,
well, I can't wait to share it. I know there's probably people here that would love to know what that experience was like. I know you're signed to some level of confidentiality. I get it, but it is fiction, correct?
It is fiction, yes. And so I took some poetic liberty on some of the stories and changed the names to protect the guilty in some cases. And so that some people I've worked with over the years over my 40-year career would still talk to me. So,
all right. So I thought we can go first, and I thought we can go back and forth also with Connie as well. But I would like to go with you first. First off, so you're technically a warden at a facility. Is it at a jail?
It's a county jail. It's 1,400 beds, so it's as big as some of the prisons I've had the privilege to be warden of. They call me a chief here. The titles vary depending on what agency you work for, but it is a warden's job. But my title is actually chief.
Would I be able to ask you how you made your journey to be a chief or a warden?
This whole corrections thing started totally by accident. I mean, I didn't grow up saying I want to work in a jail or prison. I don't think most of us did. When I was a kid, I was 22 years old, and I was trained to teach adult non-readers how to read. So my first assignment was a county jail. I'd never been in jail, didn't know anyone in jail, but was assigned that to do this Illiteracy Volunteers project. So I went in there and actually loved it. Wasn't doing anything fabulous, just teaching phonics when the right person walked in the room at the right time, and they were looking for a programs coordinator. So I became the programs coordinator for a county jail, a small 100-bed facility in southern New Hampshire. I loved it. I loved the facility, loved the people I worked with, but decided I didn't like cold weather and packed it up and came to Florida. So that was the beginning of my career. And really every opportunity I've had since that first, fluke really, has been just a stroke of luck, I guess, or divine intervention. I'm not sure how you want to.
You're a doctor. There's no luck here. You're a doctor. There's no luck. I mean, for me, it's luck. You know what I mean? I'm still waiting for the state to realize, like, what have we done? But hopefully I'm retired by now.
Listen, I would just say there's no coincidences, right? So there's a reason why you're there, and it's great.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I was a university professor I have to plug Florida State University. I was a professor there, and I had a great life. And when Governor Jeb Bush came in, I got a phone call asking if I wanted to be Deputy Secretary of Corrections. They were looking for someone who was familiar with the profession. I had done a lot of research and writing on it, some volunteer work after I left the county jail. And so I took that appointment as the number 2 of then the 3rd largest correctional system in the country. I stayed for his term. And then what I didn't know is that when governors leave, if you're a gubernatorial appointee, you also leave. So then I went into the private sector of corrections and was assistant warden and warden at several facilities. They ended up putting me in Ohio, and I realized it was going to snow again. So I called Seminole County, who had looked at me a couple times, tried to hire me, and I just wasn't willing to go. The time wasn't right. So I've been here at Seminole County Jail for 6.5 years. By far, this has been the most professional group of people I've had the privilege to lead, partly because of pay parity and high standards by our agency. So,
and I'll be honest with you, lately, hey guys, just so you guys are aware, corrections has been understaffed for quite some time. So there's a lot of desperate hires happening where people are just looking to fill the numbers as opposed to getting quality. So it's great to know that there are still some facilities out there holding to those high standards. Correct, Doc?
Yes. And you know, our sheriff started in corrections. That's where his roots are. And I think with Sheriff Lima's experience in corrections, and he understands the importance of what we do, he has really treated us equally. Our staff here wear the same uniform, make the same pay as our road deputies, and we often swap back and forth. So I really appreciate his appreciation for us and what our people do. You're right, Anthony, we've been not just understaffed, we've been underappreciated for a long time. This is an important factor of the criminal justice system that often gets overlooked. And we really keep the community safe by keeping the offenders in and providing opportunities for them to change when they leave if they want to.
Well, you know what's great about what you're saying? Funny thing is I had someone say something to me blaming the system for all its failures, and just an automatic defense. I said, guys, listen, we're the fail safe. You know, to me, you know, the preventing should be done there. We're the kind of the last resort. So before you start blaming us for the failures, you know, it's funny how they get sent to us, and it's funny how we go back and they come back. So, you know, you wind up getting defensive because you believe in the work that people are doing. So it's not like I want to ridicule anybody, but if you make me choose a side, I know the dedication behind the wall. Connie could explain the dedication behind the wall. You know it. So for people to sit there and second guess us, I get very upset because I've worked with people that were passionate, but you know, you release them to the community and sometimes the community doesn't know what to do with them. And that to me always becomes a big concern. Now, so what we're going to do, guys, first, if you guys don't mind, is we're going to stay with the topic of manipulation for a little bit. And then we're going to ask some questions that would relate to what you guys want to ask. Now, don't get me wrong. You guys could definitely ask questions based on manipulation. I want to keep the theme going. And then after that, when we get closer to the end, I'll field a few questions that may be more related to anything outside of manipulation. Maybe Dr. Laura Bedard, maybe something with Connie, whatever the case may be. So I did have some questions that were sent my way. And I thought maybe, if you don't mind, Doc, if I can go with Connie first on this one.
Sure.
Connie, one of the questions that was sent my way by Alicia, she wanted to know if you can give her an estimate of how many civilians are typically working in prisons and jails.
Sure. So at last I did some benchmarking. The corrections workforce was anywhere between 750 to 800,000. And of that, 25% in general are civilian employees. So about 175,000 to 200,000 civilian employees.
Right. And then, by the way, guys, that's a big percentage. I mean, that's 25% of the working force. And again, that's safety and security makes up 75%, which I feel those numbers are dwindling a little bit as we put more money towards rehabilitation. Now, with that said, and I'll go with Connie first, and then Dr. Laura Bedard, because I think she would like to get involved in this. When it comes to the civilians, now you're looking at, guys, now I want you guys to listen to this. 25%, so that's a big number, around 100,000 individuals. Are they being properly trained to deal with the inmate population?
So that is the premise of Civilian Corrections Academy, right? So in many states, non-uniform staff can go through an abbreviated version of like a traditional academy training. So traditional academy training varies from state to state and also varies from, I guess, institutional needs, right? So like This one may be 4 weeks. This one is 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 24 weeks, whatever that length is. And so for non-uniform staff, so far, I think I may have spoken to 2 or 3 states where non-uniform staff go through the entire academy training. And then for most others that I've spoken to, they go through like sort of the safety and security side of things. They may go through some downing the duck conversations, which is equivalent to sort of some inmate manipulation. But they're not necessarily going through a solid training where they're going to address the issues of manipulation and all the other things, right? Because I think the way we have to look at it, right, is that a non-uniform staff is going to come in with their level of expertise. So if you're a nurse, you're a doctor, you're food services, whatever capacity, like social worker, teachers, right? Whatever capacity you come in, you already have that expertise. But sometimes they get kind of put in front of the population, and then they'll sort of trial by fire, right? They're learning what to do and what not to do, and hopefully have some good people around them to kind of help guide them through the process. And I think the other place where we kind of fall a little short is that sometimes we give all this information, but then there's no context to the information. So I've never had an inmate start yelling at me, right? So maybe I don't know what to do if I'm learning about that in training, but I've never been in facility to really understand how do I use what like the traditional training has taught me, right? And how do I not overreact? So like our barometer is a bit off because most of us don't have law enforcement experience. And this is really a whole new world for us. You're muted.
Damn it. Damn it. All right, Connie, fair enough. I knew it too, and I couldn't push it fast enough. We wait for those moments. You know, it gives us purpose. You know, hey, Doc, I saw you in agreement with some of the stuff that Connie said. I mean, you did enter as a civilian in the background. I mean, are you familiar with this?
Yeah. So Connie, I love the fact that you're running a civilian corrections academy. I think that's really important, and that they get the same training, or at least equivalent, you know, something similar to what our security staff do. The thing about manipulation, though, is it's not exclusive to civilian employees. I have seen a lot of certified detention deputies and correctional officers get manipulated as well. So it's not the job that you have. I think it's a character issue more than anything, because I've seen men and women. I've seen both genders get manipulated by the same gender inmate, opposite gender inmate. So I learned long ago, it's really a character issue more than anything. But I like the fact that you're trying to help professionalize civilian staff, because frankly, we can't work without them. I'm a civilian. I've never been formally security trained. Now I've got 40 years and I know a little bit about the security side of the house, but I started as a civilian. And I'll tell you what saved me in my career were really strong mentors. I had mentors throughout my career who guided me, who, you know, if I was looking funny or thinking something, it seemed like they got me back in line, and I appreciated that. So mentorship in this profession is really, really important.
Yeah, you know, you said something that was great too. Hey guys, so check this out. Like, so if there is some lack of training when it comes to dealing with the interactions with the inmate population, even Connie had mentioned it before, an inmate yelling at me, what do I do? Again, you have an inmate that's trying to intimidate civilians, or even just getting too close for them or to them. That's where the environment's got to come into play, the people that have that level of training. So if the agency is not providing it to those civilians, which they should, this is not an exchange for that, but you still need an environment that reinforces what's expected with that security mindset. So therefore, if an inmate decides to come up to a civilian, even if the civilian may not know what to do at that point, it's okay. Custody's right there, reinforcing what is expected during that interaction. So if the inmate and the civilian are talking, custody is usually somewhere around knowing if the dialogue is appropriate, if it's inappropriate. And then maybe, I love what Dr. Laura said, Dr. Bedard, is that mentorship, because I believe custody and civilian should have a good relationship. And I love the mentorship. I think there's a lot we can learn from each other. So therefore, if there's something that's inappropriate, you know, the officer could, you know, catch on it immediately, or the civilian, you know, will ask, hey, was that okay? And just kind of build that relationship with each other. And also it also shows the, It shows the inmates that we're connected, that we're working as one, and therefore no staff member is ever alone. Because as we get into manipulation, I want you guys to realize something. The way an inmate gets this to work is they're going to make an effort to isolate staff. So the more that we reinforce our efforts to communicate with each other, that we're working as a team, the less likely it is for the inmate to employ their game, because the two things that they're looking at is disposition, and they're also looking at the environment. I may have a vulnerable staff member here, but does the environment make it a resource? Like, can the environment help me get what I want? Or is the environment a bit of an obstacle where it's going to stop me because staff is just on point? Would you agree with that, Doc?
Absolutely. You know, inmates are masters at manipulation, and it usually starts off slow. And I think civilians might be more vulnerable at some points because they might believe the story that the inmate tells. So, for example, I see it all the time. An inmate may tell a staff member, "Oh, my grandmother has cancer, and I'd really like to write her a letter, but I don't have a stamp. Would you mind bringing me a stamp?" And that's phase one. They get the staff member, civilian or certified or correctional staff, custody, to bring in a small favor. So they bring in the stamp, and then the favors get bigger and bigger. And then they've got the inmate hooked. Connie mentioned the article, Downing a Duck, which was actually written by an inmate about manipulation. I would recommend all correctional staff read that. And that each agency provides staff training for sworn and civilian in inmate manipulation. Because this is what I think happened in this Vicki White case. She was an otherwise exemplary employee. She started a relationship with this guy over 2 years ago, and more of that will come out as they continue the investigation. And I'm going to venture to guess that people saw things and didn't say anything. That's the other thing we need to do. We need to take care of each other and make sure that if one of our fellow employees, whether they're equal rank or not, if they start to slide, that we get them back on track. That's our obligation. So as cliched as it sounds, Anthony, see something, say something. Every time I've done an after action on an inappropriate staff inmate relationship, staff say, "Oh yeah, I remember seeing her or him spend a lot of time with that inmate. I remember he got a job change because that officer or staff member requested that." So you, in hindsight, you learn a lot that people saw and failed to say anything.
Yeah, and guys, sometimes they're afraid to say things because it's more of a feeling. Because remember, the process is not always seen. You know, the only thing that's really seen is when it's too late. It's when the outcome occurs, when you have the escape, or when the phone has been given, or when the drugs are there. But the process is more of, I feel something's not right, but what if what how should I approach it? I'm so afraid. What about if I'm wrong? What about if that person gets mad at me? It's like, hey, I'd rather be wrong than be right and not do something. Steve Trucker asked something, Doc. He wants to know, how often is there training in the prison system? So in general, what are we looking at?
Well, each system's a little different. You know, we do a great job in training for fighting, shooting, maybe even defensive driving. What we don't do a great job in is training and retraining inmate manipulation. So at our agency now, every new employee, whether they're food service, nursing, or security staff, they go through a 2-hour class in inmate manipulation. But I think it should be required yearly so that you can just remind staff at some of the games that inmates play. You've written about it a lot, Anthony, and I appreciate your book on that exact topic.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, the manipulation decoded. Thanks for shouting that out, Russ. But as I said, I mean, a lot of the stuff I did was I modeled off the experience from the past. I also used some theories from social psych, and I kind of replayed certain events in my life that I thought I had conflict with. And I thought, I kind of like, you know what, if I felt a certain way, then I can't be the only one. So at that point, let me just admit my vulnerability, and you never know who's going to come out of the woodwork and say, yo, Gant, it almost happened to me. This is unique. I like this question from Alicia. So again, guys, just going back to the Vicki White, eventually we will venture off. We have other stories to share. But I do like this question here. So if we can answer in general, using the Vicki and Casey White situation, wouldn't the kitchen have noticed the extra food? Shouldn't they have noticed? Doc, you want to go first?
So yeah, they should have noticed. And there's so many things, you know, I think, again, as this investigation continues, we're going to find a lot of red flags in this case that should have been noticed. You can't just say, you know, she's a great employee, I trust her implicitly 100% of the time. You have to always question what's going on. Be aware of your surroundings and question when something, I always tell staff, if something looks like a duck, it's probably a duck and you need to say something.
Right. Right. And you know what, Doc, you mentioned a good point too, because the key about saying something matters, because I want to mention something, guys. The people at the highest level, we may walk around a lot, but we only see what people are going to show us. Because once we're walking around, the whole environment changes. Because, oh, shoot, Gangi's walking around, or Dr. Bedard's walking around. So we get the checks, we get the 10-2s, and everybody cleans up their act. Now, with that said, the one person that would know is the person that's delivering the food. Now, if the supervisor has access over that, I still don't think that in my position, if I was the front line, if I knew something was wrong, you wouldn't be able to intimidate me to not do the right thing. If I felt that they were coming in visiting too much, or they were giving extra food, somewhere along the line, it's going to be documented somewhere. You know, it has to be, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for what's happening in my unit. So, Doc, would you agree if the front line is very limited in what they pass up, then the problem is management's not going to know?
I absolutely agree. But, you know, staff at all levels have to have the professional courage to say something, because in this case, she took the inmate out. It could have easily been bringing a gun in the facility and putting all other staff in jeopardy. So, you know, you have to say something for the safety and security of yourself and the people with whom you work. Again, I've seen it way too many times. It starts off small, it gets bigger. And I think that staff usually feel like they're the exception to the rule. Well, you know, I remember taking that inmate manipulation class, but I think this guy really loves me. That's what they end up thinking. Yeah, you laugh, Connie, but it's true, right? I mean, again, when I've interviewed people after the fact, they've said, oh yeah, well, I thought we were different. I thought this was a real relationship. I go back to Dana Mora too. When that vocational instructor, she helped 2 inmates escape. And from what I understand is she literally waited on the street corner for them to pick her up because she thought they were going to go live happily ever after. Thank goodness they never picked her up because she might have ended up dead as Vicki White did. So inmate manipulation is way too common, and you've got to have the professional fortitude or courage to say something. You got to tell somebody. If you don't feel comfortable telling a supervisor, tell a peer, and hopefully they'll bring it to the forefront. Or go confront the employee and say, hey, I've noticed you've spent a little bit of extra time with inmate Smith. You know, maybe you need to check yourself. You got to have the ability and the courage to do that.
Right, and someone mentioned the blue wall. The inmates knew and COs knew about White's situation, but the blue wall was in place. You guys want to hear my interpretation of why the blue wall exists? If it does, I'll give it to you guys. I you know, being in a custody background, I could tell you why it may exist, but it may not be something you agree with. But I can give you a interpretation that's a little bit different than what you're going to get from the public, because a lot of people believe that the blue wall is in place to protect corruption. I actually have a different perspective on that. So if you guys are interested, let me know. Hey, Connie, you were laughing at something that Dr. Laura Bedard said. What was it that caught your attention?
The ones where they, you know, they think that they were really in love with them. You know, I just feel like, you know, everything that we've learned about working in facilities, working with inmates, like the inmate is going to always be the inmate, right? Like, and if this is just an opportunity to gain access to something, right? Like this is just, you got to be able to take it for what it is. Like the inmate's not in love. I mean, so perhaps I'll backtrack, right? Perhaps there was some point where maybe there was some emotions that developed in that engagement, the interaction. And it could be that inmate's been locked up for so long, they haven't had any female, male, whatever it is, encounters, engagements in so long. So maybe it feels like something similar, but at the end of the day, I feel like the secondary gain is always at play. And the moment we forget that, I think that's when you get people who are slipping, who's thinking that the inmate was really in love with me. I don't know. It's just interesting.
And you know, I was going to say, sometimes we contribute to it by perhaps putting a staff member in a post that's secluded from other staff members. And then the staff starts to over-identify with the inmate population and under-identify with his or her peers. So you, as administrators, we need to be mindful of that as well. Every facility has what I nickname a punishment post, the post nobody wants. And a lot of times we put perhaps staff who aren't performing at 100% in those posts. And then they get disgruntled at the shift supervisor who put them in that post, and they over-identify with the inmate population. And listen, we all know inmates listen and watch everything we do. If I show up at work tomorrow without my wedding ring, I promise you, inmates are going to notice that. So they gather information, they notice it, and then when the time is right, they pounce on the opportunity. So
they share it. I think that's something that they have to know too, right? Like if they feel like they found a crack, they found a vulnerability, right? And they may not have any particular interest in you, but they know someone who does. They are sharing that information. So, and I think that's what they get right. I think we don't get it right because there's times where we don't share information we should be sharing. There's times where we should be putting things in the logbook that we're not putting in the logbook. We should be writing reports and we're not writing reports. Meanwhile, they share everything that they're able to identify.
Yeah, and guys, actually what he said here, that's why I have it on my book. I do have the inmates playing chess, which I would consider more strategic. Checkers, could be wrong, don't get me wrong, but more reactionary. But I want to mention something too. When the inmate is employing a game with staff, when they're trying to set them up, they want staff to see that connection, because instead of us doing the right thing and approaching that staff member and saying, hey, you guys are a little too close, we tend to avoid that staff member, which further isolates. So you have this inmate that is doing it out in the open, and then when other staff come in, they get a little closer. And the next thing you know, instead of the staff doing the right thing and saying, let me go talk to Connie, let me go talk to Laura, just let them know that they're a little too close. They don't do that. What they do is we wind up going back, talking amongst each other. Now we spread this. So now we got a whole group of people that are totally not talking to this officer or talking to the staff member. And now the staff member truly is on an island. We even mentioned disgruntled workers. If you get people that are disgruntled, the natural thing to do is step away from them. They're disgruntled. Who wants to be around people that are negative? But in corrections, you can't do that. A disgruntled person will put themselves on their own island. And next thing you know, inmates are going to go right to that, because in order for an inmate to be successful at manipulation, they have to be able to isolate staff from any counter influence. If they are not able to do that, then the time and effort is it's too much. So I'll go with Dr. Laura Bedard first. Doctor, do you agree part of that game is they want the other staff to see that a connection is forming to some extent, because they know that most of the time staff may talk a lot, but they're not really going to approach that staff member?
Oh, absolutely. Inmate, I always say, if you want to know what's going on in your facility, check out inmate.com, because they know more than I know about who's dating who and who's on the bad list and who's on that punishment post I spoke about. And then, they'll come up and they'll say to one officer, hey, you should have heard what this officer said about you. And then they'll pit us against each other. That's part of opening that crack that Connie spoke about. So yeah, we have to be on guard all the time, And I think, one of the things for civilian staff, Connie, is a lot of what we do in corrections is really counterintuitive to their training. For example, nurses are trained in empathy, right? A nurse might put her hand on an inmate's shoulder in an act of compassion, and the inmate totally reads that wrong. And so I always say, they're patients, but frankly, they're inmates first and patients second, or they're inmates first and students second. And if you can always keep that in your mind, I think that you'll be more successful in this business. Because anytime a staff member does the wrong thing, like this Vicki White case, it taints all of us, all of the honorable, noble people who work in this profession. It takes one oops to really impact negatively the profession of corrections.
Yeah, and to get generalized out, which is sad.
It is sad.
This is a good question. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So, do staff always work in the same pods? Is there rotation of duties? Now, guys, just for my perspective, we would like to rotate inmates, especially when it comes to certain jobs. You don't want them to build a level of comfortability. So I get the rotating the inmates for certain jobs. I get it, unless there's jobs where they're progressive jobs. Like you may have jobs in food service that's also a trade. So what happens is they come in and they learn the different levels, and then as they get higher up, you can't just easily replace them because they've learned to get to those positions. So some of those higher level jobs, those progressive jobs, you can't just rotate the inmates out. We'll try to rotate inmates out of, let's say, hospital porter positions, but that's tough too, because to be an inmate and be a hospital porter, you don't want them having any type of drug charges ever. But the problem is a lot of them do. It's somewhere in the backdrop. But with that said, when it comes to pods, here's the thing. It's very hard just to maneuver inmates, especially when it comes to housing units. And you also want an officer who knows the unit. You don't want to be switching these officers up every day because you want some level of consistency so the inmates know what to expect. But there is a bit of a boundary, if you will, because you could get officers or staff that work that same area all day. And yes, they're consistent with what needs to be done, but they're also overly involved with the inmates because the interactions with inmates are a lot more than it ever was before. So Doc, what would be the boundary? I mean, let's do it this way. Are you okay with officers or staff having bidded posts in housing units where they don't get rotated out because you're looking for consistency in running a unit, so the inmates know what to expect, or because now interactions are a lot more than it ever was, would you prefer that the staff get rotated out to kind of eliminate any form of undue familiarity or developed relationship?
So in of the 8 facilities I've worked, I've had both models. This one currently, we have staff that bid a post and position. So they stay there for a year rotation. And I like that because they get to know the inmates, which helps if an inmate has some kind of psychological episode or a tragedy in their family. The staff member can recognize that inmate's acting funny and perhaps prevent them from harming themselves. It is a double-edged sword. Now, on the inmate side, I have always suggested that we rotate inmates out of jobs frequently because of what you spoke about. It does place a little more of a burden on us, but I think it's a good idea. So if you have these preferred inmate jobs like a chaplain orderly or a porter job or working in medical, those are positions that I suggest you rotate frequently.
Yeah, 100%. Because as I said, I mean, you can at least have control of that and inconvenience the inmate. A job could always be replaced unless it's one of those jobs that are connected to the trade. Because at that point, there's the job part of it. Don't get me wrong, but they're learning a trade. Like as I said, for us, culinary arts is a program. They start off in the pots and they work themselves all the way up to cook. So now if I start firing all the cooks because they've been in the job too long, I'm not going to have any cooks to replace them. Again, that's at my facility, maybe a little different elsewhere. Would you agree, Doc?
Yeah, and let me tell you, it's a lot easier in a jail to rotate inmates because my churn is much faster than a prison. In a prison, when you've got a steady inmate population for perhaps years at a time, that job rotation becomes a little more challenging. In the jail system, our average length of stay is 29 days. So there's a lot of that rotation that just happens because inmates make bond or get sentenced and move to another facility.
Right. And I know, Connie, working in medical, I'm sure you get a lot of nurses that deal with the same inmates all the time and, patient and doctor or patient and nurse relationship. Yeah. How do you make sure that's balanced and we don't cross the line?
I mean, so that's always a challenge, right? Particularly, I mean, it's not even just a nurse, right? So there's some inmates who receive repeat care, right? So if that nurse is running the diabetic clinic, right, and you have to see this inmate every day, right? Or if this particular nurse may be running a chronic care clinic, right? And they have to see the same inmates every day. So what we try to do is do regular in-services so that they're reminded, right? Because it is a very, so in order for them to be professionally efficient, right, there is the expectation that they do create these trusting, I don't want to say relationships, right? But in order to garner enough honest information about what's going on with a patient, that way the treatment plan is appropriate and that patient isn't getting sicker, right? Because they're excluding information, there has to be some sort of trusting, some sort of trust established there, right? And I don't want to say relationship because that's not the intention and I don't want that to be misunderstood, right? But we get a lot of inmates who aren't always honest about their medical history, their mental health history. And sometimes we can't always get all of the community collateral in order to get a full picture of what that inmate is presenting with. So it comes with a challenge that you want to get close enough to the inmate to get honest information so that the treatment plan is appropriate and effective, but still maintain that level of social distance so that the inmate isn't also getting information from them. Because it happens that way sometimes, where the inmate tries to establish that commonality, and then all of a sudden they're having a conversation with the inmate, as opposed to it being a one-way exchange of information, or not even exchange, right? So I think it's a matter of us having to actually be intentional about reminding them about that, because it's easy to get lost, and that's your patient, especially if you're advocating for care. Right? If there's a level of care that this patient needs that maybe your facility doesn't offer, and you need to get them transferred somewhere or what have you, like, it matters that one, yes, thank you for the rapport word.
I was trying to find that.
Yeah, that was a good one. Thank you for the rapport. So establishing that rapport is important. But I think as we're trying to deliver patient care, it becomes critical that we're remembering that they are inmates and not just our patients.
Yeah, now I know we have over 100 people in this room. I want to say something. So Shane, listen, check this out. I did a video on females working in corrections. There is a need for females with males, just as there's a need for males with females. You got to realize something. I'll say it quick because I don't want to get off topic, but hear me out. We're not always fighting. You know, most of the time what we want to do is we want to de-escalate. Now, don't get me wrong. I've seen females that can handle themselves very well. But just in general, I think the reason why a lot of people think that females don't have a place in a male facility is because all they think is that we're doing all day is fighting, and that's not the case. A lot of the time, I want to communicate my way out of stuff. I mean, I'm going to tell you something. I'm not a female. I'm not the biggest guy either, but these inmates are huge. Male or not, they're going to get the best of you. I worked at a female facility where they could have took the best of me. You should see how some of these females could fight. So I think that perspective is a little bit primitive, because it makes it look like all we're doing is knuckle dragging all day, when a lot of the stuff we're doing is creating positive interactions as best we could in an effort to motivate some high level of expectation. But I do want to add one other thing too.
So wait, you're responding to this comment?
Yeah, Shane Hester. So I wanted to add one more thing too, guys. The part of rehabilitation is exposing the inmates to both genders. You can't just isolate them, especially in a female prison. A lot of the inmates have been sexually assaulted by men. If we went ahead and decided not to expose them with any, good, proper male role models, when they get out into the street, we haven't done anything. We haven't. Actually, we probably set them back. So, as I said, I think that primitive perspective of what you feel corrections may be is not what it's about. At the end, it's about interacting, having the inmate reach a level of expectation. And at that point there, all hands on deck. And I find myself to have women that are very, very key at doing that. There's something how they can build that connection with an inmate that seems to be less of a challenge as opposed to a male trying, and also vice versa. I find that males can be very good role models to female inmates because there's something about the opposite gender that they may listen to. I'll start with Connie, just to finish off this talk quick. I'll start with Connie and Laura. What's your thoughts on that real quick before we move forward?
So I think there is, in that male-female dynamic, there's a way that, so one, I think women, we're able to connect and communicate, and not to say that males cannot, so I don't want anyone to assume that that's the other side to that, right? But we do have a way of communicating well and de-escalating, which I think is something we really need, especially as we look at the uses of force that we see, and usually they don't turn out very well. I think the other thing we want to acknowledge is that the power dynamic is a bit different as it relates to female staff, male inmates, male staff, female inmates, right? That power dynamic that exists, it's insinuated, but it's not like like, because I think as a female, I don't come across as threatening, although I have authority, right? And so there is no need for the inmate to want to go toe to toe with me. I don't want to physically overpower this inmate. Like, I have no intentions of doing that. And so I think when there is like another male going against a male, it goes beyond just the direct order that I might not be listening to. I think there's just a male presence, a male against male creates a different power friction that may not exist in the male-female relationship.
Yeah, I want to say, so before Dr. Laura comes on, so the gentleman said a remark saying that we may be naive if you believe women. So I'm not going to go back and forth because I'm getting texts. But I do want to mention one thing before Dr. Laura finishes her comment, is that, guys, the system right now for you to think that women can't step up, and I work in the prison. You're talking about 20 years of experience. I have seen women run to codes that men would run away from, you know, and I'm being honest with you. And at the end of the day, it's not about fighting in a prison, because at any moment, regardless of your size, I have seen some of the biggest men knocked out, and I have seen some of the strongest women fight to save someone's life. So having said that, guys, I think that's a bit of an unfair generality based on a primitive perspective of where you think we are. And it's not about fighting every day. It's not. It's about trying to make an effort to move things forward in a peaceful manner. Believe it or not, and I'm not even going to say fighting because we don't fight, we de-escalate. At the end of the day, if people believe that's all we do and that's the message you want to get across, then I'm going to be honest with you. That's the reason why the media can bastardize us. They need to see the other side where we all play a part. What's your thoughts on that, Laura? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, I've been the warden at a male facility and female facilities both. And as I said at the beginning of the show, inappropriate relationships with inmates is not a gender issue, it's a character issue. I've seen females have inappropriate relationships with female inmates. I've seen males get into inappropriate relationships with male inmates. And then, of course, I've seen the typical male, female, female, male. But it's a character issue. It's not a gender issue. So I think we need both genders, because I do think we communicate differently and we bring different things to the table.
Yes, and that's the key. Now to get back on topic, and it's still good to express it. Hey, unsolved crimes, we just kind of talked about just now when you were coming in. But I do have a video. If you go on my thread on YouTube, maybe 4 or 5 videos down, where I have Connie and a retired captain, Barnett, talk about the importance of women working in corrections, kind of explains the roles, the difficulties, and I think you'll get a kick out of it. It's about an hour long, so look for it. I believe on the cover they're both saying "stop now" or something, but you'll see it. It's a good video, and I think it's something that you will actually enjoy and will definitely answer your question. Someone mentioned, where is it? Hold on one second, because I lost the question when that person. Give me 1 second. I know who said it. Darn it, I lost it. Yeah, guys, I lost. So I'll have to go back and just. There was a good question here that the gentleman kind of took me off key. Let me see if I don't want to. Hold on, guys. Minimum wage. I'm not gonna be able to. Oh, here it goes. There it is. Thanks, guys. Sorry about that. What could really have been done differently in Alabama, considering Vicki was a supervisor? Forgive me if it's been answered. So I'll go with Dr. Laura Bedard first. Laura, how hard is it to say no to a position of power?
Well, so maybe I'm unique. It's never been hard for me. I mean, you've got to stand for what's right. Integrity. Look, integrity is the most important characteristics you have in any business, not just corrections, in any business. And if you see something wrong, you have to have the courage to speak up. One of the most difficult points in my career was turning in a warden who was not doing the right thing. I was the assistant warden, and I went to this person and I told that person, I said, hey, you're not doing the right thing. If you don't correct it, I'm going to have to go to your supervisor. And I did. And I was alienated for doing it. But in the end, I know I made the right choice. She ended up, unfortunately, losing her job. And I think in the end, staff understood that I did it for the safety and security of everybody. So I was nervous to do it, but I realized it's the right thing to do. And that's what you got to do. In this business, it's a matter of life or death. If you become complacent and let people continue to do the wrong thing, you're part of the problem.
I like that, by the way, because that was one of the things that we were discussing a few days ago, because she had a position of power. Could she have intimidated? To be honest with you guys, if you're doing something wrong, the person that has the leverage is the one that knows you're doing something wrong. So go ahead and try to intimidate me when I know you're visiting this inmate too much or whatever it is. I mean, I'm not going to be afraid to do the right thing, because in the end of the day, my loyalty is making sure that I'm able to still take care of my family. So, and you're going to be held responsible, because at the end of the day, your sworn oath to protect and serve isn't to a person. You know, it's to the agency or the facility. What's your thoughts on that, Connie?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think when you operate from a space of integrity, right, it's hard for you to not say something regardless of who the person is who might be offending. And so, you know, for many of us, I think people want to take away, sometimes people take away the fact that we're all human, right? So we do get nervous. We do measure, you know, what are the consequences of me coming forward? Am I going to be supported? What will be the backlash? Will there be retaliation? So like, those are all things that everyone is going to think about. But I think at the end of the day, when you are doing the right thing, speaking up is the right thing to do. And I mean, yes, there have been instances where I think, you know, some people may have gotten the short end of the stick when they spoke up, right? But that doesn't mean it wasn't the right thing to do. That just means that perhaps there was some other corruption in the agency they were working in that needed to be dealt with, right? Because sometimes that's how the layers start to peel, right? Because someone has now stepped up and said something. You know, I would just encourage people, like, you know, you've got to operate from a space of integrity and know that you could sleep at night with the decisions that you made. If you've witnessed something, you saw something feels off. Like, I've always been a speak up, say something to somebody, because even if you're afraid to say it directly, the person you spoke to probably is not going to be afraid, which is probably why you spoke to them to begin with, right? Because sometimes we just need the reinforcement. We need the encouragement to come forward. But also, once that person hears that someone has noticed something, someone has seen something, you never know how just that inkling sometimes has an impact on the person's behavior.
Right. And guys, I just got a message. Shane posted on one of my things that I blocked him from speaking on a live chat. I get the fact that we all have opinions, guys, but at that point there, if the opinion is really just done not as an opinion, but rather I'm just going to come at you and just be a little bit disrespectful, especially when not only do I have females in the audience, but I have 2 female guests, and to try to question their credibility because of their gender, I don't have room for that. So I'm sorry, Shane. You're more than welcome to come back on the next show. But at this point here, I got to do what's respectful to first the 2 ladies that I have on the show. So to sit there and entertain that, I can't. And then obviously for the women who are watching this. And guys, don't forget, I'm here to paint a perspective of corrections that's fair. And I'll be damned if I'm going to retard that progress and literally say that I agree with that at any sense or form. Just not going to happen. Oh, thanks for the compliment. But I said she's so glad she found this channel. Worked in corrections for a few years and moved out to a hospital. I definitely saw a lot of craziness, and my dad did not like me. You know, that's a good question, guys. Thinking about that, you know what? I don't know if she realized she asked this, but Vanessa, you came up with a question I want to ask, and I'll start with Connie first, then Dr. Bedard. When you started working corrections, did you have any resistance from your family, your parents or whatnot? Okay, so Connie, you got to go first. Okay.
I'm like, is that a question? My parents hated it. I had 3 brothers. And my mother said none of my sons have ever been in a prison, and my only daughter chooses to go there every day. They used to be so upset. Like, at a point, I talked to my dad, and my dad, he kind of just simmered down. My mom, it took her a little bit longer to kind of win over, and it was really because of the fear, right? So I think initially, because I didn't even know what I was walking into, I couldn't necessarily quell their fears, right? Like all the unknown, the uncertainty, all that. And so I had to kind of live through it a little bit. And then I could offer some reassurance, like, hey, it's safe, you know. And really, is it safe? No. Like, I mean, it is. It's like relatively safe, right? The threat of violence is always right around the corner. But that's not something I'm going to tell to my mother, right? Like, it's just kind of like, Mom, I'm going to be fine. I'm with the officers. But at the same token, you know, like, I felt fulfillment in the work I was doing. So it wasn't that like my mom or my dad could persuade me to do anything different. I mean, quite frankly, I came from working on Wall Street, right? And some of those sharks on Wall Street were worse than the inmates. And so if I can survive there, I can survive here. That was really it. And honestly, I think when you come in from a service position, you know, the inmates want something from you, which is a very different dynamic on how they engage you, right? Like there weren't a lot of confrontations because at the time I started as a discharge planner, which in their mind, it meant she's going to help me get out, right? So there wasn't a lot of friction and craziness, right? Like, yeah, there were things that I learned along the way where they were trying to manipulate me. And at first I came in, I wanted to help everybody, but you know, that's beside the point. Thank God I learned, right? But absolutely, my parents initially weren't very supportive of that just because of the unknown and the fear that I was going to get hurt. And I think over time, and they realized like, okay, well, their daughter's not much of a wimp, right? Like I think I'm okay. And I think that helped a little bit.
I'll tell you something, guys. Connie corrects me. I call her today with just going, yeah, she knows what she did. I call her today, I want to say check in, but obviously that's not the case. All right, guys, listen, I called her today to kind of tell her what we got going on for today. She lets me talk for about 10 seconds. And
20 minutes.
Was it 20 minutes?
Yes.
Well, time flies by when you're having fun. But so she's like, Gangi, you want to say how you're doing first, or how's the family, or something like that? And I said, you know what, you're absolutely right. But then I was going right back to what I needed. Hey, Doc, what's your thoughts on that?
So my family was fine with it, really. I think they thought it was odd, but they weren't afraid for my safety. But the pushback I got, remember, I started in 1982. And the pushback I got was from other staff that women don't belong here. Back then there was a female matron, we used to call them, and some nursing staff, but there weren't women working in the jails in the early 80s.
What was a matron? What did that person do?
That was a correctional officer, a female correctional officer. And actually in the beginning, Connie, they wore skirts instead of uniform pants. Yeah. That's showing my age a little bit, but we have come a long way. This profession has evolved. What I worked in 1982 is not at all what it is today in 2022. We've progressed. We've really professionalized, and I am just so honored to work in corrections. I hope that others feel the same way in this business.
Sorry, guys. My daughter spilled a bunch of gum upstairs, and she's trying to pick it up with one hand. She asked me for help. I told her to use the other hand. Now you have two people, and she's happy. You know what I mean? This is. Hey, Donald asked a great question. Donald said, how do you keep somebody from going out of their prescribed role? Now, the reason why I think this question is very important, and I'll have Dr. Laura Bedard go first and Connie, and then I would like to comment on this as well, is the prescribed role is our boundary. And for me, I like custody's prescribed role, always safety and security. So they're starting off at a very good foundation. The helping profession, the ones that come in with that want to help, how do you keep them within that boundary? How do you make it known to them that they're working for the agency and not the inmate?
Yeah, I think constant reminding is good, and training like Connie's Academy also are helpful. You just always, what I said earlier, where they're inmates first and patients second, I remind staff all the time. That doesn't mean they're lesser. It just means that's their role for now, an inmate patient, as opposed to just a patient that they care for. So I think you have to just help them keep things in perspective. I want them to help the offenders in our care because most of them are getting out, right? And we want to provide them opportunity to become better citizens. But you have to help them set those boundaries and make sure that they stay in their lane. There's an inmate lane and there's a staff lane, and we all have to stay in our lane to do the profession well.
So how do you feel about the new move to get rid of that inmate label?
I'm not a fan.
Wow, that's good, because neither am I, obviously. I have a whole chapter of it in my book. I believe, I like what you're saying. Like, I believe custody, the inmate label always has to be that primary label. They are the fail-safe. If an inmate's able to manipulate that fail-safe, we have a problem. For like, let's say medical or social services, I still think it's professional within their title to call them a client or a resident or a patient. But again, there's a caveat to that. In the back of your mind, like you said, is what's the context of it all? Still within as the inmate context, correct?
Right. And we all go through different roles in our life. You know, I was a student one time and I stayed in the student role and the professor was in their role. So, I mean, it's not that they're lesser. It's just that this is where they are at this point in their life. And again, it doesn't mean we treat them disrespectfully or badly. It doesn't mean we dog them for being there. It just means professionally we keep them in their lane.
Ooh, let me get so Connie, you know what I want to do real quick before I get to 616 this question? Two things. So Connie, let's talk about the prescribed role. But hey guys, you may not know this. Connie did a video a while back, and I think we could revisit the story again. Connie was almost, now by the way, I want you to tell, we all could almost get caught up if we're not insightful. So I'm not trying to say anything bad about Connie, but you know what I'm going to get at. Connie was almost manipulated by a female who had just given birth. And I would love for Connie to share that story, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I was the the health services administrator, and we had an inmate come in. She was far along in her pregnancy. When she came in, it was already a high-risk pregnancy. They had identified that the baby she was carrying had some sort of rare disorder. They weren't sure, if the baby was going to live, all this stuff. So fast forward, she's now incarcerated and we're providing all the care we could provide. And at the time, because it was a high risk pregnancy, we would only do, we had an internal OBGYN who would check her periodically, but she was actually taken out to a high risk doctor to manage this pregnancy, offsite. Fast forward, she gives birth and she's told that this baby is only going to live for a couple of days, if so much, because at this point, the baby's already connected to all these machines. And so she initially, went to the warden. Well, she had the unit officer speak with the clinic captain who came to me. So there was a chain of command that was followed to kind of get some authorization for her to have support when she goes to the hospital, because she was going to have to make the decision to take the baby off of support. And essentially, internally, we did an interdisciplinary team meeting just to understand, all of the moving factors for what was going to happen, why, and blah, blah, blah. So the ultimate decision was, as administrator, here's a request, which was, would we allow her treating social worker to go to the facility, go to the hospital with her to make this decision? So baby's already born. She doesn't need that medical support, but we were more concerned of her mental capacity at that time. Now, initially I said no, because I figured the hospital has these support staff in place, but knowing her, she would not have connected to this person she just met. She was already going through the treatment process with someone. So it was just kind of like, okay, fine. Social worker goes with her, supports her through this whole process. And of course, it's still a secured process, right? Custody's still with her. We're in the room, the patient or the inmate and my social worker are in the room. They go through this process. They take the baby off support, baby dies. And of course, it's sort of that journey of sort of walking through, talking through this loss. And of course, there's the thought of, is this person going to be suicidal? Here are all the things we're going to need to put in place following what just happened, because now she doesn't have this baby as sort of will to live, right? Fast forward, inmate writes a letter, pretty much says, that their roommate is complaining, or their cellmate is complaining because she's crying all the time, right? And me, I'm like, oh my God, this is so awful, right? So first of all, that letter shouldn't have came to me, but it came to me, right? I'm feeling awful about the fact that, like, I can imagine what she feels like just losing the baby. Here's all the stuff that's going on. you know, this is a sad situation. How do we get her support? So I go to my clinic captain. I say, hey, can we make an arrangement to get her moved? Because we could see how this is going to escalate, right? Because you've got inmate sobbing, carrying on, and the cellmate is like, I can't get no sleep at night. This could turn into something else, right? And so she sends me a letter thanking me for, you know, helping with this situation and whatever. I'm like, all right, fine. Then she sends another letter, which now my secretary would generally go through all of these because we were an accredited facility. We had 24 to 48 hours to turn around inmate requests, whether they were medical requests or mental health, whatever they were. They needed to be in the appropriate hands and placed on the schedule for someone to see that person and follow up with the actual request. So secretary says, hey, Connie, I don't know, this inmate wrote you again. And I'm like, oh, who? Because like a lot of times you just read stuff. You're not even thinking what inmate it is, right? It's whatever. So I read it. And this request now is the inmate is looking for like a change in their work assignment. Now, this obviously has nothing to do with me, right? This has nothing to do with the baby. It has nothing to do with all of the emotional stuff that I was most concerned about. And so my secretary says, why is she even writing to you? Right. Which I was like, you know what? That's a good question. But even then in the moment, I didn't think about it. I'm just like, oh, you know, I helped her out before. Maybe that's just it. Until then, I go to my clinic captain and I'm sitting with him and I was like, can you do me a favor? But in the moment, it was like right there where I'm about to ask him if he can get her a different work assignment. I was like, why am I asking you to do this? Right. But here it is, this inmate is using the fact that there was this act of kindness, right? I'm thinking, I want to make sure she gets the support she needs. She wants to thank me. It's like all this stuff, right? And so I'm facilitating these things that she's asking for in the back end. And here comes this far out left request that has nothing to do with medical, nothing to do with mental health. But because there's like, oh, I know this person. I know this inmate. I know what they were going through. I'm thinking I'm going to try to help this person have a, I don't know, better stay here. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I was thinking in the moment. But, you know, I think that as we consider like these requests or we consider the manipulation process, right? Sometimes we do have to take a step back. And it wasn't until like I realized like I'm asking someone else to get involved in a process where we know there is a due process. This is not it, right? And so, of course, like I tell my secretary to just write. I don't even write back because I also don't want to become her pen pal. So I tell my secretary, just write back and say, you know, give your slip to, you know, Captain so-and-so or to the housing unit. But I think it's that thing, right? Like when you are emotionally drawn into something, right? So here it is. I'm like, oh my God, what would it feel like if, you know, my baby died and I'm in prison, right? Like this is an awful time of my life. I could imagine that she's going to commit suicide if the opportunity presented, right? So like if she wasn't on constant watch or if she wasn't going through all the stuff. But how many times, like how many instances is it that, you know, we are faced with opportunities to be empathetic or to be compassionate or that we identify with something someone's going through. And then that is like if they know, right? Because she doesn't know what I was feeling or what was driving my yes. She just knew that I said yes twice. And here was another opportunity to get a third yes.
Mm. And guys, if you want to hear that story, we have a whole video dedicated to that because you're right. They took advantage of someone that's being human. I could relate to her because she's a mother. I'm a mother. And you got to be careful of that because if the prescribed role is your reminder of who you are. That's why the label matters, right? If I see you as an inmate, I see myself as an officer or whatever my role may be. But once you connect on that different level, you know, we're both mothers, we're both fathers, we're both fans of the Giants. It opens up to things that really shouldn't be there. I remember a lieutenant telling me, if you think of an inmate when you're home in any capacity, you're already too involved. I'm going to go with Laura first on this question. Unsolved Crimes Uncovered says, Dr. Laura and Connie, what would you tell your daughters if they wanted to go into the same profession as both of you that you wish you would have been warned about beforehand? Ooh. That's a good question. I didn't catch the bottom part. I only saw the first part. So that's all right, Doc. You're first.
I think I would encourage her to do whatever she wants to do. By the way, she's not interested at all in corrections, but if she were, I would certainly stress the integrity thing. Stay in your lane, maintain your integrity, always do the right thing, and good things will come. And I would also tell her this is a very, very exciting profession. You know, we've expanded from care, custody, and control to care, custody, control. I use compassion and community as well. So you have an impact. You have the opportunity as a corrections professional to change a life. And I think it's an awesome responsibility and it's a great profession. So I would encourage her to get into it.
All right. Yeah. And I like that, by the way. Now, I have two girls myself. One I could definitely see as a correctional officer. One I would tell her not to go in, not because I don't believe in the profession. I just know how she reacts when she stubs her toe. And just not a little bit of a drama there. But I digress. Connie, what would you tell your daughter, Connie?
So, I mean, my daughter already has her eyes set on my business when I die. So she's told me, right?
Wait. Just
she's like, anything happens, I'm gonna run Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm like, oh my God. Which obviously means that at some point she's gonna step her foot in some sort of facility, because I would recommend you cannot engage in the business process if you've never walked the walk, if you can't relate to the experience of being behind the wall. And, you know, if there were any advice aside from that, if she decided she wanted to go into corrections, I would support that. But I would also just remind her that when she steps through those doors, she has to remember how she wants to end her career. If you want to end your career in a good space, you have to conduct yourself accordingly from beginning to end.
You know what, Connie? You just hit something real quick, guys. So corrections could be very stressful. You know, the things that you're going to be exposed to now. By the way, for those getting into this profession, you know you're going to see things. I mean, I have seen people take their lives. I have seen the end result of assaults. Nothing to brag about, because in the end, you're not stronger for it. You're really not. It's just things that could haunt you later on. You just have to be able to know how to deal with it. But with that said, guys, I think the key thing for me is that I know who I am when I entered, and I also know where I want to be when I'm done. I think when Connie said that, it's so important, because you can get lost in this profession if you have no destination. Someone said, Gangi, how do I deal with the stress of working in this job? And I think this could apply to almost any job, but have a purpose. If you have a purpose, then literally, guys, problems become opportunities, challenges. If you know what it is that you want, then, you know, it helps you deal with the rocky times that any profession could have. You know, at the end, I got 5 years left. And at that point, I'm not going to do a day more. I'm going to find my purpose in more of just keeping up with what I got here, maybe the books out there. But if my daughter ever said that she wanted to go into corrections, I of course, I'm going to be nervous because I know a little bit about the profession, obviously. But I also know that there's purpose. And I think that, and there's a greater good, believe it or not, here. I know people may not realize that, but there is. And if I was to sit there and tell my daughter not to do this, and I really felt that, then I would question everything I've done up to this point. Almost 1,200 videos on YouTube talking about how good the profession is. And the ultimate test is when someone says, would you tell someone you love to be in this profession? And I can honestly say yes, because I wouldn't have done 1,200 videos if I didn't believe in that. So yes, I thought that was a great question. All right, guys. So
I want to give a shout out to Knitting Artisan, who just wrote that, you know, she firmly believes in making decisions in a logical space and not from emotions. I think that is something that's key as we maneuver through corrections, right? Like, and even as we talk about manipulation, right? Manipulation happens many times because we are in an emotional space and not in sort of a logical headspace, which I think really, if we allowed ourselves to take a step back, I think all too often we want to jump in and solve it, right? We want to just have the answer. But I think sometimes taking that step back allows you to be logical and not emotional.
Yeah, you know what? I'm sure Dr. Bedard wants to comment on that too, right? The logic and emotion.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it is, you do have to act out of a logical base and not an emotional base. And you can't take it personally. If an inmate writes you up or, you know,
Right.
you can't take it personally. It's not personal.
Yeah, guys. So I want to start wrapping it up because we got Duty Ron that's coming on at 8:30, and I know we have Duty Ron family here. So the last thing I want to do is run into his show. They're so generous to stop by, and please, guys, send my love to Duty Ron when you guys see him. He was so nice to bring his audience here, and the support that they provide, I mean, is amazing. So first we'll go Dr. Laura Bedard. And obviously we're going to have you on again. I'm sure you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Any closing thoughts?
Just, you know, maintain your integrity. It's a great profession. If you want to get in touch with me, you can get me at drlaurabedard.com. Anthony, I thank you for what you've done to help move this profession forward. We were talking earlier, you've been doing this for a decade at least now.
Close. Yeah.
And it is the only space available for corrections professionals where we can talk openly and candidly about some of the struggles that we have. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. She was on one of my first shows a while back when we were doing it for iHeartRadio. And it goes both ways. I mean, I knew of you because of your work that was already being done, you know, 10 years ago. So when I was just starting, you took your time to talk to me. So, you know, obviously, you know, you're a pioneer, you know, so just to still be connected with you, still see that you're involved. This is love and passion, Dr. Laura Bedard. So I'm honored and humbled to even have you on the show. So thank you.
And Connie, what a great addition for me to meet you. I love it. I hope we can connect offline.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but do me a favor. I call her every 2 minutes, so try to find some time in between every 2 minutes that I call her. Connie, would you like to say anything in closing?
Oh, listen, I absolutely love, you know, having these discussions. I think the questions make me really think about just, you know, my journey and why am I still here? Why do I still do it? You know, you walk out of those correctional doors, you know, it's like that sigh of relief. And then I signed back up, right? Like, what's got you doing this, right? I absolutely love this work. I love, you know, our profession. I'm proud to still be connected and I enjoy the journey, right? Like even meeting all of, you know, our guests, you know, meeting all of the audience. It's been such a good time, I think. And I mean, I think into our correctional folks that are in our audience, just remember to stay focused and to just stay aware, right? Because sometimes we get so caught up in the last code. We get so caught up in that last directive that just teed us off, right? We get caught up in like the stuff, right? All the politics of stuff. But what we really need to be focusing on is how do we stay safe and how do we protect our information so that we don't have inmates trying to manipulate us.
So true. And I will say, so 616, we know her, right, Connie? 616 Love?
Yes.
So at the beginning of the show, she gave some shots, you know, your microphone's off, stop moving the camera. So I'm going to close the show. You see where she said thanks or thank? Not even, she didn't even bother putting the S, and there's an unnecessary B. You know, I'm going to let the show
Why
end.
you got to shout her out that it might just be a typo? Jeez.
No, I just want people to know. I'm going to
616 Love. I'm sorry.
No, I look, she didn't put the S. I can't even get the bunks. It's more of fab, you know, but I'm going to leave that up there because that's fairness. I knew it would come around. Karma is crazy, guys. But guys, as always, guys, I kept the laughing. I want to make sure she was laughing too. So don't want to lose a subscriber like I lost the other guy earlier today. Yeah, well, guys, well. Hey, guys, so real quick, guys, I know we kind of went off topic, but guys, I promise when we do the show, we'll answer any questions that come your way outside the profession, inside the profession. Our job is to help you. But you know what's funny? We're also very insightful people. So we tend to give out pretty good advice in general. So again, just to be able to have this dialogue with you, to share our experiences, but in return also share yours. I mean, I have no problem. If you guys have a story, I'll bring you on the venue too. I mean, at the end of the day, we learn from each other. You know, I mean, that's the key. And Friday, I will have Gary York. You guys want to check out his channel. It's True Prison Stories with Gary York. He's a former prison inspector. And he's going to kind of tell us what it is that you go through when you're investigating a prison escape. Now, that's this Friday. Wednesday, I have a young lady that's going to come on that was assaulted by an inmate as they made an escape out of a hospital trip. She's going to share her story and tell you the good things that she's been doing afterwards. And the good thing about this all, guys, is that you guys can ask them questions directly because I'll pull it right from the feed. And I would also like to, besides thanking my guest, I would also like to thank Alicia B. Alicia B has been a great help to me. She's helping me come up with some of the questions that she knows this audience may be interested in so I can get a little bit better. I will also obviously put videos out for my people as well, but I also want to introduce you to people in this profession that have survived some stories. So you can go ahead and ask them questions and maybe get an understanding of what it's like to be in a hostage situation. Or I have a video up right now about a female that was almost raped by an inmate, Rosie. It's on my community feed. Sergeant Megan Callahan, who was killed in Bedard Correctional, I interviewed her mom. That's on the community feed. So it'll give you a chance to interact with the people that are either directly involved or are, you know, the on the outside of being directly involved, like a loved family member. And again, so I've got a lot of content we're going to try to revamp. So I promise you guys, I'm going to do the best I can. And when in doubt, even if I feel the topic is boring, I got Connie. Connie could come and smile on this platform for 2 hours straight. And my views and my likes and my subscribers, they're going to go up. Hold on. Why we end? Let's just do this. I'm going to focus on Connie.
Unbelievable. You gotta take that off of me. I am going to turn off my camera.
No. I hope you guys, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe, everyone. Love you guys.
Thank you.
I'm so over you.
Good night, you guys.
Good night.
Good night. Good to be